It's the Fan Late Night with Sean Drotar on Sports Radio 104.3 The Fan.
The story is getting old if you are a Denver Nuggets fan. The NBA kind of did an NBA thing there. The bad whistle really had a lot of problems about it. And the truth of the matter is that can't be avoided. And as the Nuggets fall tonight to the Los Angeles Lakers, after mounting a pretty furious comeback, the Lakers end up winning 114-108. The Lakers find themselves shooting 35 free throws, many of them in the fourth quarter. That's 12 more than the Nuggets managed to land in a 6-point game. Nikola Jokic got in foul trouble early. Paul Millsap got in foul trouble immediately after halftime. That impacted their ability to play defense, and it impacted their ability to rebound. Many of those fouls were of the, let's say, dubious variety. And when you take a look at the way the NBA tends to work in the playoffs, and it's frustrating. It's absolutely frustrating. It's completely real. And the NBA, it's not, I'll tell you this. I covered the NBA starting in 1994 for ESPN. So I've been at this for a while. The NBA is not fixed, but the NBA is uncomfortable with smaller market teams making the finals. It is a holdover from the David Stern regime, and the league simply can't get past it. The officials find a way, they end up, the truth, you just watch it. Just watch a game. Whether it's a big market team with a lot of fans, with a lot of stars, or a small market team with superstars, this is how it works. Because the truth of the matter is, Michael Malone just a moment ago was asked about the refereeing, and he said flat out, I'm going to have to go through the proper channels like they did. Quote. That was what Michael Malone just said moments ago. And he's absolutely right. We know full well that the Lakers basically started politicking after this game. It was not a secret. And they got many, many more foul calls, including in the fourth quarter when the game was tight. This is predictable. I understood it was predictable. I warned people on Twitter at SDROTAR. It was predictable. I let you know how it was happening in real time and what was going to happen in real time. And it played out exactly as I said it was going to. Because this is, again, not new to me. 26 years. So it's not rigged. But picture it this way. Much like anybody, referees are regular people, right? Regular people. And they're not making the millions that players are. What happens, we work in sports, we're talking about sports radio. What happens what would you do if you met LeBron James? Would you be a little overwhelmed? Would you be a little starstruck? So are referees. And if you are a star, those human referees get starstruck, and they make the calls from the players that they think are a big deal. If you think that Anthony Davis is a big star and you're excited, even on a subconscious level, I know they're professionals, but they're humans, and you see Anthony Davis jump up, land awkwardly, and fall and yell about his ankle, you're going to call the foul. And they called one on Paul Millsap, even though Millsap didn't move at all. Davis didn't land on his ankle. There was nothing. There was no foul. There was nothing. There was nothing whatsoever. But Davis jumped into, and this is an old trick, right? Kobe Bryant was great at it. Kobe Bryant would jump up and kick his legs forward into the defender to create contact, and then they would call it on the defender. Now, if you weren't a star and you tried that, there's either a no call or it's an offensive foul. But if you're a star and you feel like the star fell down, you're not really thinking about who caused the contact. That's what referees do. They feel they're supposed to protect the stars because you know what? The stars are what sell the games. The stars are what get the games on TV. And the truth of the matter is Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray are star caliber players, but they are not stars. And because they are not stars, they don't sell games on TV yet. They can't go to a broadcast in Boston or Maine or Virginia and go, the Denver Nuggets are on. People go, ooh, but you can say LeBron James and Anthony Davis are on. And now people in those non-NBA markets go, yeah, that's right. Michael Malone in his post-game conference said, I think I'm going to have to go through the proper channels like they did to see if we can get more free throws. And he's right. It worked. It's that simple. It worked. The Stars argued they weren't getting enough calls. That got relayed to the referees because somewhere in the NBA, someone's saying, well, watch a little bit. Make sure you're watching it a little closer because the Lakers think it's not fair for them. And then you're going to call calls on everything. And they did. So this is just the way the NBA works. It's not rigged. But picture it the way that geek culture says fanboys and fangirls, right? They get a little excited about the stars that they see, and they get a little crazy, they get a little hyper about it. That's how the NBA works. That's how the NBA works from the top down. It's how the NBA works at offices, and it gets all the way to the games and to referees, who I mentioned are human. You don't want to get yelled at by LeBron James for not calling something. The guy's 6'8". You don't want him charging up at you and arguing. It's human reaction. So the NBA makes those calls. It swings back and forth. And in this case, you can call it loser talk. Maybe the shows tomorrow morning will call this clip. We'll listen to this clip and they'll say that it's loser talk. But I've been at this for 26 years with this league. And tonight's game was decided by the referees. The Nuggets were the better team tonight. The Nuggets deserved to win tonight. And the Nuggets had it plucked away from them by a flurry of calls for the Lakers and a flurry of non-calls that hurt the Nuggets. When the game was more or less firmly in control for the Lakers very late, then all of a sudden the Nuggets get a couple calls. But this is the way the NBA works. And when I told everybody, when the Nuggets got to the Western Conference Finals, and I said that if they win one game, that's a great result for the Nuggets. For the Nuggets, if you're playing against the Lakers and you win one game in the Western Conference Finals, that's basically, for Denver-sized markets, that is winning the whole thing. That's as close as you're going to get. Because things like tonight happen, and they'll continue to happen. And here's why they continue to happen for the big markets. Now, one, when you look at the large markets that sell more tickets, that get more viewers, that have more of an impact when you're selling it across the country and across the world. The NBA is a global sport. And when people around the globe watch it, they're not paying attention to all the teams. It's just like when people who know about Lionel Messi aren't following the entire La Liga, right? They're not doing that. They know about Messi. They know about Barcelona. They know about Cristiano Ronaldo, but they don't know the whole league. And so those get sold, and it happens in every league. It happens in the NBA. It happens in the NFL. It happens all over the place. But the problem in the NBA is that penalties are called so frequently that they can dramatically alter the course of a game. Chris Webber pointed it out on a couple of occasions during the broadcast. Reggie Miller did too. And it was noted that the Lakers were getting a flurry of free throws in the fourth. And you will hear Michael Malone, of course, say, that's not why we lost. He can't say it is. He's going to get a fine. It'll look bad. He's got to say that Well, we'll have to just do a little better on defense and do a little better on this and that. And yes, they do. They do. They need to fix some of the turnovers. They need to control what they can control. But the truth of the matter is there are things that are outside of the Nuggets' control in this game. And they can't do anything about it. And it is the way the NBA is built. This is systemic to the way the NBA functions. And that's why I want to warn people when we got into this series, try not to put too much of your hearts into it. Because the Nuggets were never going to beat the Lakers. Not unless Anthony Davis or LeBron James got seriously hurt. Because it's not going to happen. They will get the foul calls. And even guys who are past their prime that are names, Rajon Rondo, Dwight Howard, they're going to get foul calls. Because they're names. And the Nuggets aren't names yet. And part of the problem with the NBA is by the time those guys get to the names, and the Nuggets have a chance, they have a chance of being able to do this. Because maybe they can keep this team together. That those guys become names while still on the Denver Nuggets. Part of the problem is because the NBA succeeds in big markets, players like grouping together because it's not football. It's not 53-man rosters. It's a little over a dozen. So you can affect the game with 2 or 3 stars in a way you can't in any other capacity. So that's why they all get together and form super teams now. Because then they know you're going to get to probably the Final Four if you can build one of these super teams. You can get pretty close to it. You'll have a shot at it. You at least get to the Final 8, probably the Final 4. So that's why you have super teams in the NBA. The ancillary earnings in a larger market, LA, New York, Chicago, Dallas, when it comes to marketing and commercials the guys can do and all that can supplement their salary. And so it has always been advantageous to go to the big markets. Now, because players have decided, and you can weigh on it any way you'd like, that instead of trying to combat rivals, today's stars are Kevin Durant. I couldn't beat the Golden State Warriors. I think I'm just going to go to the Golden State Warriors to win a ring. And that's the way the players are working now because they want a championship, and I can't blame them. But this is why it works like it does. That's the system. It's always been advantageous to go to bigger markets because you'll make more money. You'll be more famous and you'll make more money. Now you go to a big market because you can make more money and be more famous, and you bring a couple friends because the super team concept is there. Knowing, by the way, that the NBA, by nature, like I said, fanboys and fangirls. And that trickles all the way down to the officiating in game. And that's what you saw tonight. You will hear the Nuggets, I assure you, talk about the offensive rebound difference. What won't be noted is the late offensive rebounds by Anthony Davis were not able to be contested by Nikola Jokic because he already had 5 fouls. So he couldn't contest it the same way. But people will just look at the stat and go, oh, well, the offensive rebounding wasn't good. Is that why the Nuggets lost? Why wasn't the offensive rebounding as good? That's what I like to do on this show. I want to tell you why things happened, not what happened. I know they got out offensive rebounded. Why did it happen? Part of the reason why it happened is because Jokic got stuck with some silly fouls early, not all of which were either legitimate or would have been called on Anthony Davis. And that's just the truth. Because of that, Jokic could not compete with Davis late trying to get offensive boards because he would have fouled out. And Davis knows he won't. He's not playing with 5 fouls. He's not going to get those calls against him because fanboys and fangirls. Trickles all the way down to the floor. The Zebras are too. They're human. And they get starstruck. The NBA is a starstruck league. And the big markets tend to have them. The Lakers have the most of them that are left in this playoffs. And when they get past the Denver Nuggets, you'll see them get the same calls and same treatment against the Celtics or the Heat. Not as many as against the Nuggets because Boston and Miami have more famous stars in larger markets. But you'll see the same thing because they have the most stars. call it what you will with Kevin Durant, but Kevin Durant read the NBA perfectly. He knew that in Oklahoma City, if they weren't going to get past Golden State at that point in time, they were never going to get past Golden State. He knew it. He felt how the NBA worked. And so you know what he did? He pulled the chute. He went to Golden State and he got his ring. And it was a smart move because Kevin Durant knew how the NBA worked. This is how the NBA worked. I think a lot of Nuggets fans who have followed this team for a long time and followed the NBA for a long time understand that. If you don't, I hope I explained it a little bit. We'll definitely get into it over the course of the program. Matt Moore, our Nuggets insider, will join us at 10:30 after he finishes all his work with the Nuggets and the press conferences and talking to players. So he'll join us at 10:30 and we'll break it down even more. And his opinion will be different than mine. But that's how it works, Denver. That's how it's always worked. And it wasn't going to change this year. Thursday Night Football wrapped up. We'll have a chance to talk to our friend Nick Ferguson. We'll do that next. The Denver Nuggets fall in Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals, 114-108. The Lakers lead the series 3-1. Obviously, the jokes online about, now the Nuggets have them right where they want them. Keith Bishop and John Elway are not coming into the building here, okay? It's not how it's going to work. The Nuggets played a great game tonight. Remember, by the way, they're still shorthanded Will Barton. It's pretty remarkable that they've been able to make this run without Barton, who I do not think is a franchise-changing player. But is he worth 6 points a game? Yeah, he sure is. So the Nuggets played brilliantly. And the Lakers politicked before the game. They politicked during the game, and it got them just enough to sneak ahead. 12 more free throw attempts in a 6-point game. And the beneficiaries of those, as you would expect, Anthony Davis and LeBron James combined had 5 more free throw attempts than the entire Denver Nuggets team. But like I said, this is how the NBA works. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest. This is what I expected to happen. As soon as the Lakers said that they were talking to the NBA about getting a better whistle, and they got one. For everyone on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043, texting in about this and about my explanation of how these things worked out. I love the enthusiasm, time to win 3 in a row. And it could happen. Like I said, if James or Davis ended up getting hurt to miss the rest of the series, that's a possibility. But the idea of the offensive rebounds deciding it, obviously I explained it. It's a little more complicated. There's a couple of texts here from, I'll try to find the ones I can read on air. Your frustration is evident, Denver. I absolutely get it. But the from 970-426, if Jamal Murray and Jokic could get the whistle as much as LeBron and the other superstars do, they certainly win game 2 and maybe this one. Love the effort and heart from this Nuggets team. They're a few plays away and a few young guys to get the next level as finals champion. They actually are very close because they very easily could have won game 2 just if Davis's prayer 3 clanks out and he hits it and good for him. But you're right. Easily could have won that and deserved to win this one. Should have won this one. And if you're a Nuggets fan and thinking, boy, that game was stolen, yeah, go ahead and think that. I don't have a problem with it. The catch is understanding the intent. The NBA's intent is not to take the game from the Nuggets. But they end up being starstruck by their own markets and their own players and their own opportunity to get ratings. So again, it's not fixed. It's not rigged. But if you're not in a big market and if you don't have superstars, I mean, guys that sell a whole bunch of sneakers, you're fighting uphill. And that's just the way the NBA works. The Nuggets are simply not quite good enough to overcome the Lakers and the inertia of the NBA at the same time. They're just not quite good enough yet. But they are really, really close. The question about why does football succeed in small markets but not the NBA? I don't understand this. Well, that's a good question. And let me see if I can break that down for you. The reason is because football, first and foremost, larger rosters, right? 53-man rosters. And we know this is a quarterbacks league. I understand that. And if you have a superstar quarterback, you're in really good shape. But it's also a sport that has a lot of injuries. The Broncos know about that this year. And it's a sport that even with the top quarterback, you can't just win at will. It doesn't work that way. One player, even the quarterback, can't necessarily take over a game. By the nature of football, it doesn't work. So the NFL tends to, if you actually look at the marketing of the NBA and the NFL over the last few years, and the NBA, the NFL is trending towards doing what the NBA is doing, and there is a danger to that, but that's a topic for another night. The NFL says it's the Packers versus the Cowboys. And it's treated on absolutely equal footing because the sport is equalized. There's a hard salary cap. The history shows that if you can manage your salary cap well and add the right talent, that you can win at any level. And the fans know that. If you were to start any of our major leagues all over again, no one's putting a team in Green Bay, Wisconsin. Nobody. They might not get a minor league baseball team in Green Bay, Wisconsin, but they can still be a powerhouse in the NFL because of the nature of the salary cap and the fact the league promotes itself as teams more than it does players. In the NBA, of course, if you have a LeBron James, you can have LeBron James and a handful of dudes, replacement level players at the NBA level, and you will still be good enough to make the playoffs because you can always just go down the court and hand it to LeBron. The NFL and football, by nature of the sport, doesn't do that. Baseball, by nature of its sport, can't do that. Hockey is probably the closest. But hockey definitely is a team sport. You'd like to go ahead and send it in and give it to Nathan McKinnon and let him do his thing. But that doesn't work entirely. But the nature of the sport in football and baseball doesn't let it. In football, you get the best quarterback in the league. He's only on the field half the time at most. Not even on the field. You can grab Babe Ruth. He still comes up to bat once every 9 batters. Doesn't matter. But the nature of basketball is that best player is on the court all the time. So the dynamic is you can change it. 5-on-5 with one player never leaving. If you have LeBron James or you had a Kobe Bryant or you had a Larry Bird or what have you, you have an advantage that the other team can't overcome realistically. And you can jump forward in an enormous fashion, instantly. So the nature of the two sports means that football can succeed anywhere. Basketball could succeed anywhere, but the simple fact of demographics changes it. If you were to look at it, and let's be totally honest, if you go to New York or LA, you get the Madison Avenue folks all over you in those big markets because they'd like to sell you and hype you up and get you a shoe line or an apparel line or whatever. And that's going to make you a lot of money, not just now, but potentially long after you've retired. They're still making Air Jordans, and they're still making a lot of lines. So if you were a player that was a top caliber person that could go whatever you want, and I say this as a native Coloradoan, if you could get paid the max amount of money by the Nuggets or the max amount of money by the Lakers, why would you not take the Lakers? Because you can make more money in LA that you can't make in Denver. Slowly but surely, give Adam Silver credit. He is trying to turn this around because he knows that the internet changes things. Look at the explosion around the world in social media at Jamal Murray and his success. And if people start following Jamal Murray, then the Denver Nuggets come along with it. Silver is honestly trying to fix the remnants of that stern regime. But there is an immense amount of gravity that is going to continue to hold him back. We'll touch on that a little bit with our next guest, but I want to talk about football with the man that you usually hear this evening, but with the Thursday night football game not available, so we want to have him on. I mean, why would you not want a weeknight without hearing from Nick Ferguson, our next guest? Nick, how are you doing?
I'm doing well, Sean. How about yourself?
I'm okay. I'm getting stuff off my chest that I've known for about 20 years and been waiting to do on radio for about 9 about the way the NBA works. And I figure you, as a guy who appreciates someone telling you the truth, the unvarnished truth, hopefully that's been revealing as well.
Well, yeah, it is. And when you watch the NBA, I don't care who you're rooting for, whether it's the Celtics, the Heat, the Nuggets, or the Lakers. You just want the games to be called as fair as you can. And in today's game, or even in games years past, you're not going to get that because this is a difference between NBA All-Stars and NBA Superstars. And, Sean, you've been covering the game a long time, both for football and basketball. You know a lot of those calls do go to the superstars, especially down in the clutch. But it all depends on what you do in these types of moments that really allows you to get that recognition throughout your peers in the league and from officials as well. And I know before the Lakers-Nuggets series started, there was this whole big chant about if the Nuggets lose the series, it's going to be because the officials took it out of their hands. And once again, we've watched enough basketball to know that there are players who flop on both sides of the court. We know that referees, they're human too. They miss some calls. They give some calls away, and then they make up for calls later on that they missed earlier in the game.
Right.
This is the way that we deal with basketball. This is how you have to look at it as a basketball fan. But I've always coached this way, and I've always been coached this way. You never allow the referees to dictate the game. You go out and you dictate it. In this case, as far as basketball is concerned, and we're talking about the Nuggets, you got to be great on the defensive end of the floor. And when you get down to the offensive side and you're in the paint, you got to challenge those guys. If you don't challenge them, you're not going to get those calls in those close moments. And that's what we're seeing unfold in this Lakers-Nuggets series.
Yeah, I think that is really true. And I mean, I was explaining some of the differences between football and basketball, and that is, but you've seen the same thing. Let's take it to football a few years ago with the Seattle Seahawks, right? You would have loved to play on that defense when they were basically clutching and holding and interfering on every single play. And the Seahawks basically said, well, we're going to do it and dare you to call a flag on every play, knowing that the referees wouldn't. So there are ways in every sport, and we've seen it in football too, that you can dictate that and you can control a little bit of what the referees will do, and that can be used sort of for good or for evil. But when you look at the way the Seahawks covered a few years ago, when they still had Sherman and Chancellor and Earl Thomas, and they were clutching and grabbing on every down, they just knew that the ref wasn't going to throw a flag every down, and so they would let some of it go. That seems to be what you also see in basketball, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It all depends on what is your mentality or what are you known for as a defensive player or offensive player coming into the game. And you're right. There are a lot of iffy calls that the Seattle Seahawks got away with, but that was their style of football. That was their brand of football, physical, in your face. So when they put their hands on guys, officials kind of let them play the game. If you don't play that way the entire time and you just choose to actually show up that day and be really physical, the officials are going to say, well, you're doing something that, we're not accustomed to you doing. I mean, think about the great, Charles Barkley, right? He would get away with things on the court from a physical standpoint and a verbal standpoint because the officials knew that was Chuck. That's the way that he responded. That's the way that he talked. So if somehow someone else starts saying the same thing that Chuck would say normally to an official, that guy is going to get the technical call and not, Chuck. And when I look at the Nuggets, and I would talk to Sisu about this on our show, it's like when we see the Nuggets, what are they really? What's their identity? Are they a team when their backs are against the wall, now they want to come out and play physical and tough? And if you do that, the officials already know that's not your mentality. So you're just living in the moment. They've had a lot of moments collectively in this Cinderella, type season. Now they're going to have to make sure they keep it alive on Saturday, trying to make sure that the Lakers don't win. But you have to be this way night in and night out. And when you don't do that, now we're saying, well, is it a false narrative? Still in the phrase from Pat Shermer? No. I mean, that's what it kind of looks like. But you have to go out there every night, Sean, and you have to impose your will. If you don't, the officials are not going to give you those calls.
And that's the most valuable lesson, Nick, that the Nuggets can take away from this, because they are very, very close, talent-wise, to being ready to compete for the whole thing. But it is that mentality that only comes with experience. Either you have to be an older player or you have to be working your way through these kind of playoff experiences to understand it works. It's a hard lesson. And one of the things that I try to explain to people when we're talking about any sports, whether it's about the Broncos youth, the Nuggets youth, you can't skip steps. As much as you'd love to, you can't skip steps. Just like Jerry Jeudy had a couple drops, and you know what? Unless he has those drops, he's not going to pay attention on the way he's going to focus to catch. You have to make the mistakes to learn what you did wrong so you can fix it. And there's really no way to skip that.
Well, Sean, you make a very valid point, and most people don't know that. When you play the sport, you realize that right away. Because in order to succeed, you have to fail. And early on in my youth, Coach once told me that, and I didn't really believe it. I didn't really understand that. But you figure out how bad losing feels, that you don't want to go through that situation again. So you go out and you prepare your tail off to make sure that you don't have to experience that. And that's what we're seeing when we watch Jamal Murray, right? And everyone on a national level getting an opportunity to see him for the first time, the type of player that he's grown into. This is a guy who's not ready to pack up and leave the bubble. So he goes out and he plays his tail off. Now, there are a couple of games where you're like, well, where did that 50-point Jamal Murray go? But then he's had more bigger games where he scored 40-plus or 32-plus points, or he's had a spectacular layup or a dunk or a three-point shot. But to me, that's what you're talking about. He's a young player, and he knows and he remembers what it was like for the Nuggets last season to lose in Game 7 to the Portland Trail Blazers. That's in the back of his mind. He understands the stage that he's on, that he could take advantage of it. And whether the Nuggets, win on Saturday or not, I mean, I have a lot of respect for them. They've earned a lot of respect for a lot of people outside the Denver market because this team continues to show fight. They're not there yet because they don't have multiple players who you can put on the floor if you're Mike Malone that you can rely on them to score points. Michael Porter Jr. continues to show us and impress us on the offensive side of the ball, but once he learns how to play defense, this team is going to be right there where they need to. And I'll say this. Most Nuggets fans may get upset with me. I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel as though Paul Millsap is hurting the offensive side of the ball for the Denver Nuggets.
You're right
in the
about
offseason, they need to go into in a different direction, find someone else to step into that role because in today's NBA, you don't need 3 players that can score. You need 4 or 5. So that's what Mike Malone and that needs to do, and that needs to be the mentality of the Denver Nuggets in the offseason.
Yeah, the offseason will be pretty fascinating because, again, they really are close. And that's going to be fascinating to see what they do. When you look at this, and I'm curious, because this is the thing I've wondered about football and about basketball, about every type of sport like that doesn't have a minor leagues. Hockey and baseball have minor leagues. Jamal Murray went to Kentucky. Kentucky's usually competing for the whole thing. I understand that playing in a Final Four or an Elite Eight is not the same as playing at the NBA level. And I understand that playing in a big-time bowl is not the same as playing at the NFL level. But if I were to just say, I'm a really talented guy who was one and done at, let's say, Missouri, like Michael Porter Jr., and didn't play, or I'm a guy that maybe played a few years at a top-tier school, that guy is probably more likely to learn that lesson quickly, like a Jamal Murray, isn't he?
Absolutely, because like you said, when you played for Kentucky and Coach Calipari, every place that he's gone, there's been a lot of one and done because he coaches those guys well. Their talent develops very quickly, and that's kind of the mindset that you have. It's a championship mindset. When you look at the NFL right now, you look at how many guys that are in the NFL that are playing great football that went to Alabama, that was coached by Nick Saban. It's not like a phenomenon that this is happening. These guys are introduced to the professional environment on a collegiate level at an early age. So once they get to the pros, they know how to handle it. And, what we've seen from Jerry Jeudy right now is not the same Jerry Jeudy we saw, when he was with Alabama. Obviously, he's had a couple of drops. I'm not going to say all those drops are his fault. If you watch the tape, you'll realize that. But if you put the scheme together, get him comfortable, and you utilize, what he brings to the table, Pat Shurmur, be a little more creative, now we will start to see the same type of player that was drafted in the first round. And because the Broncos are where they are, Sean, and we see Jeudy with those throws, now I've heard people now question, why were the Broncos drafting 2 wide receivers when they clearly had offensive tackle issues? The offensive line might have appeared to be bad against the Pittsburgh Steelers. I say you take away 3 or 4 plays and you change your mind. But it's about Pat Shurmur being a little more creative to develop more plays, to take advantage of the skill set of Jerry Jeudy and KJ Hamler. If he doesn't do that by Sunday, I say raise this question. How good is Pat Shurmur as an OC opposed to what we saw as the first-time play caller in Rich Gangarello?
Ooh, only 3 games in, huh? And that's where we're at. But I get your point, though, because this is different. And I make this argument a lot on this program, that when people look at a college offense, if you're especially if you're a Nick Saban type guy, you can just go pluck whoever you want across the country to fit exactly what you want. If you decide, you know what, I like 6'3" right-handed quarterbacks that can run, that you can just go find one across the country that you like and just pick him. In the NFL, you're subject to the draft, you're subject to free agency, you're subject to the salary cap, and you don't always get to control exactly the talent that you add on your team. You don't get to handpick it like in college, which means it's far more important to adjust what you do to your players. Because in college, if you're Nick Saban, you get guys who will do what you do, and you don't have to change anything. In the pros, it's reversed, right?
Well, there's a little truth to that, but I have to disagree here just slightly, because in college you do get to go out and recruit the guys that fit your system. In the pros, you do the same thing, Sean, essentially. The only thing you deal with now is there's a salary cap opposed to a salary cap being in college football, because you look and say, well, what are we doing on the defensive side of the ball, offensive side of the ball? we need to go out and get guys who fit what we do, right? And we haven't really seen that with the Denver Broncos. You go out and maybe you get a couple guys, but you don't really play them. You look at Albert Okwuegbunam now. He's a young guy still learning the system, and I don't know, how quickly he is understanding everything. But I want to get him out on the field opposed to having Nick Vernett, who's not a passing threat at all. So those coaches over at UCL training facility, just like all the other 31 coaches, Sean, they get a chance to look at the draft, they look at free agency, and go out and try to sign a guy that fits their scheme. The problem is that they have not done a great job at doing that. And when you start to get injuries, that's when you really start to see, well, how well did our scouting department really do to set us up? How well did we put depth on this team? And once again, we're seeing it now. But guess what? You're thinking the same thing I'm about to say. Is it time to start looking forward to 2021, and we're only 3 weeks in?
Oh, yeah. And the thing is, I thought it was all along. I think when Von Miller got hurt, the opportunity of making the playoffs went right out the window. It was a pretty narrow path to walk to begin with. So to me, I'm not really bothered by the notion that this year should be about finding exactly what talent you have and the ceilings they have, and then finding a way to build around it and amplify it. And that doesn't bother me. I get the idea that I know with fans, you want to win the Super Bowl every year, but no team ever does. And if you're the Denver Broncos, hopefully you're able to look in the mirror and say, okay, you know what? This might not be our year. So let's pivot and do something that would make next year our year.
Well, Sean, that's exactly the direction I'm looking at. And I know, I get a lot of trolls from certain Broncos fans who are like, well, what are you talking about? They're only 3 weeks in, Drew Lock will be back. But at the point Drew Lock comes back, Sean, where's the season at that point? Right? Are we talking the Broncos are pushing for the playoffs? I think not. I would love to see that happen, but I don't think so. So it's proper planning prevents poor performance. So you have to start looking and preparing for what's happening down the road. You say, okay, well, we're good with our tight end position because we have two of them. We're good at two of the wide receiver positions. Cortland Sutton is injured. What's going to happen when he comes back? Is he going to be the same player? We still have to go out and draft a wide receiver. We have to address maybe our offensive line to build depth and to see if we can build some bookend tackles, right? And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. Will you have Justin Simmons back? Von Miller is out. He's on the club option. So is Kareem Jackson. Are you going to have those guys back? Right? You hope that Michael Ojemudia develops, and now you can plug and play him, and he can cement Bryce Callahan for that second corner spot. But then what are you doing at the middle linebacker position? Josie Jewell is just a stopgap. I mean, he's not an every down linebacker. So here's something or a position that the Broncos have not addressed for the past couple of years that they definitely need to address, especially if you're going to keep Coach Fangio as your head coach and as your defensive coordinator. So there are a lot of things that the Broncos can use this time to evaluate and prepare for next season, because right now you have too many injuries to be really competitive and even push for that added playoff spot.
He is Nick Ferguson. You can catch him every weeknight right here with his partner Cecil Lammy on 104.3 The Fan from 7 to 10 p.m. every evening. Thanks for the time tonight. It's funny how we can talk about this, and there is so much overlap because the nature of sports, so much of it really does overlap in the way that it works out. So a fun time to talk with you about both the Nuggets loss and where the Broncos are at, and how amazingly in some ways, even though one team's going in one direction and the other's going in the other, there are a lot of similarities between the two.
Absolutely, Sean, and it's always a pleasure joining you. Anytime you need me on, I'm going to bring you the energy, and I'm going to tell you the truth.
Careful what you wish for, my friend. Have a great night.
All right, you do the same.
All right. He is Nick Ferguson. Follow him, Nick Ferguson _25. And, of course, catch him right here every weeknight. As long as there's no football on, and even when there is, well, we try to put him on right here for you so you get a little bit of Nick in the evenings like you're used to. And if you're not used to, you should be used to it. So make sure you check him out as well. The Denver Nuggets loss is definitely resonating across the Rocky Mountains. We will break it down with our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore, next. The Denver Nuggets fall in game 4. And yes, they are down 3-1, but I have a tough time thinking the jokes about they're ready to do it again is something that's necessarily a good idea. Joining us now, courtesy of Budweiser, is our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore. And Matt, after the game, Michael Malone did a beautiful job parsing his delivery in order to make a clear point while avoiding a expensive fine.
Yep, trying to thread that needle between making it clear that he wasn't happy with the officiating and addressing the issue, and also not, going overboard and criticizing the officials to cost himself money. Got to save that dough. Honestly, he should. It's not going to change anything. Like LeBron wrote the league a letter, and then he gets 14 free throws tonight, and the Lakers rack up fouls all over the place and get a number of good calls in the fourth quarter. I said since the beginning, we talked about this before the series, Sean, they're going to get a bad whistle. They were honestly fortunate to get the whistle they got in games 2 and 3. This is how it's going to be. If they're going to win, they have to outplay that. That's just going to be how it is. This is the Lakers. This is nothing new from what we've seen in NBA history. Malone can yell and scream if he wanted to and pick up a fine. It wouldn't change anything. He can send the clips to the league. That's not going to change anything. The Nuggets are going to have to win this series with better shooting, better execution, and better play. They're going to have to win this thing outright by a margin because they're not going to get a friendly whistle in this series.
And this is, I think, a hard thing for fans to notice. And you and I agree on this. We both covered this league for a while. I spent a lot of time breaking this down in our bonus time in between Thursday Night Football and the regular beginning of this show. Is the truth of the matter, and I get it. People think, well, talking about refs as loser talk. Okay, yeah, I get it, but we're full of cliches in sports too that mask a deeper reality. And when you do look at calls and you look at Anthony Davis's rebounds late offensively, but Nikola Jokic can't contest them the same way because he's got 5 fouls. These things have an impact later, and you're exactly right. The Nuggets do have to overcome 2 opponents. One of those is the Lakers. The other is not the NBA, but it is the inertia behind the NBA that they have to also overcome. And that's sort of a nebulous concept, I think, that's hard for fans to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I think it's tough to reconcile the ideas of, look, I can't sit here and tell you that this game is rigged. I just can't. I can't sit here and tell you that.
I agree.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would a league run by lawyers expose themselves to the massive liability it would take? Plus, there's so many things that you have to, you can try and dictate an outcome, and even if you call those calls, the Nuggets still might have won. They could have won this game. If Anthony Davis doesn't go 4-4 on jump shots in the fourth quarter, if Rajon Rondo doesn't hit a mid-range jumper to cut there were chances here. And the Nuggets could have played better. If the Nuggets, Michael Malone after the game, we don't give up 25 second chance points. That's why we lost this game. You can't control the officials is the point, is that you're wasting time focusing on it. It's frustrating, but it doesn't matter. Nothing you do is going to change how it's going to be officiated. If you play well, you'll probably get a better whistle because they do reward more aggressive teams. I don't think that you need to sit here and say that the Nuggets can't win. They can win, but you also, I simply, in my time watching the league and covering the league, cannot sit here and deny that, yeah, it's funny how the Los Angeles Lakers always find themselves in a position where everyone's like, wow, they're getting a lot of calls. And it's everybody. If you look on Twitter, it's people from the Bay Area, New York, and Boston. Oh, okay, bad example, Boston. But all over, everyone's able to notice it.
All 3 commentators on the broadcast said it. During the fourth quarter, all 3 broadcasters separately said it. Yeah, that's how it is. That's how it is, and everyone's just going to have to accept it because it does nobody any good. If you don't want to watch, I understand, but all you can really do is just keep going and try and play better if you're the Nuggets. Yeah, if you're the Nuggets players, that's the funny thing when we talk about refereeing. Worrying about the refs is loser talk for players. Because you're exactly right. It changes nothing. Obviously, I mean, I guess if you can write a sternly worded letter to the right people, it helps. But that's not what players do. You have another lawyer for that or something. And the Nuggets can't worry about that. For fans, this is part of the problem because they know the Nuggets can't worry about it, but they also know the Nuggets have to reach a slightly higher peak than the Lakers do in order to get there. In the rest of this series and in this game, what can they do to try to punch back, because it is going to be very easy for the Nuggets after fighting back 3-1, after then losing a game in which the Lakers' two stars get more free throws than your entire team. It is going to be incredibly difficult to avoid being demoralized on Saturday.
Yeah, but I have absolute confidence in their ability. Like, I'm not going to doubt this team's resolve. They've earned that from us. To say, like,
I think that's
they're
fair.
probably going to be down. They don't get down. They get even, and that's what they've done. And I expect them to play really well. I think they're going to win Game 5. I really do. They played exceptionally. They played well tonight. They really did. They played well tonight. Jokic did not play well. The team played well. Jokic did not play well. That's what's amazing is the Nuggets had a chance in this game, despite Jokic having a really bad game. Them catching a bunch of bad breaks that are beyond the officiating. Again, I go back to that first quarter. So if you look at the whole context of the game, Nuggets outscored them in the second and third. They wound up losing the fourth quarter by 3 after free throws to extend it at the end. So basically that was a tie. And then in the first quarter, they lost by 10 when Davis goes 6 of 6 from the field, including 4 jump shots. And what have I been hampering on? It's if Anthony Davis hits jump shots, they are unstoppable. But then he started missing. But then he picked up 12 free throws the rest of the way for 12 of his 20 points. But there are opportunities. I do think that there are things that they need to do. I don't think they'll do them. One of them is they need to start Michael Porter Jr. And they need to start him for Gary Harris, and that's for Gary Harris. And that's crushing. Like, Gary has been with this team since the start, and he's an exceptional defender, and I've been on here defending him night after night after night. He doesn't have it offensively. He's too small. They need rebounding. They just need rebounding. LeBron James has a negative net rating in this series when Michael Porter Jr. is on the floor. As much as he targets him, and he did, he goes at him, and he's absolutely made the kid look silly. Overall, MPJ's size and athleticism helps them. He needs to start so they can win those minutes. If you can't put a bigger body on the floor, you still have to have some sense of spacing. All you can do is you can just try and match it with wing size. And so they need to go ahead and start MPJ and get him on the floor as soon as possible. You can start Jeremy Grant, and that will help, with him at the 3. But I think that with Millsap, Porter, and Grant, that's the length that you're going to need versus the Lakers in order to get the spacing, because you just need to be able to rebound more effectively and to contest as much as possible on Davis.
How impressive was Jamal Murray? Because I want people to understand, he played all but 3 minutes of the game. He scored 32 points, and he didn't hit a single 3.
Yeah, I mean, just his ability, again, the body control is just insane. And some of this is when you're in a zone like he is, these shots go down. We've seen this from NBA players like Damian Lillard. With him, it's like hitting, 35-foot threes. With Jamal, it's hitting, leaning, falling away, one-handed, switch-hand layups, and all sorts of things. Just the amount of just touch and body control that he's got is so insane. And it makes up for his lack of athleticism because he's not flat-out beating guys. He's got a good quick first step, a great dribble, hesitation, gets him a little bit off balance, and he gets to these angles that nobody else can hit, and he's hitting them. And he's been incredible. He has left absolutely everything on the court, every game of these playoffs. You can't say that he could have given more in any single playoff game this postseason. And he's doing it on the biggest stage, and he almost won them the game.
The personalities are different, obviously, for Murray, but I'm going to give you a couple of comps, because watching this playoff series, I've been trying to rack my brain and think, I think I've seen this before, and it was 2 players that came to mind, Kevin Johnson and John Starks. And when I look at Jamal Murray, I see a little bit of both those guys in his game.
I like the Kevin Johnson comp a lot. I like that comp a lot. I think he gets compared to Steph a lot, and he's modeled his game after Steph a lot. He's purposefully modeled it that way. I could see the comp. The Starks one I think is a little bit tougher, but I do definitely see the Kevin Johnson one.
Starks more in personality type, in the really bulldog.
Yeah.
I'm the small guy, but I'll still try to dunk on you mentality.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, he's definitely got that. He's extremely tenacious. He's got zero quit in him. I mean, that's part of it. There's a lot of guys that will show up and bark, but Murray gets hammered and just gets back up and just keeps coming at you. And no matter what happens, he keeps his cool. And that's really impressive for a guy his age. And it was something that I look back and I think I underrated in terms of watching him develop, that he was never a hothead, that he was never a problem, that he wasn't steaming going back to the bench, that he just got it together and tried to do better on the next play. And that's paid off in such a big way.
We're talking with Matt Moore, our Nuggets insider. You can follow him on Twitter at HP Basketball. Can you stick around for a couple minutes and we'll break a little bit more down?
Absolutely.
All right, well, we'll do that next. The Denver Nuggets drop game 4 to the Lakers in very frustrating fashion for fans. Joining us is our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore. You can follow him on Twitter at HP Basketball, and I highly suggest you do if you haven't already. For this next game, Matt, now they're up against it. They have to win if they're going to move on. But when they play this game, you've talked about adding size, replacing Gary Harris in the starting lineup with Michael Porter Jr. Besides that, what do you need to do? Can you play more physically? Because the Lakers clearly, referees or not, clearly targeted getting Jokic and Millsap in foul trouble early.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is they may have to start sending more help, and that's just going to have to be like you risk more fouls if they don't get the call underneath. Like you're hoping for that is if you can't get the calls on the drives, then you're hoping to not get calls underneath on swipe ins. The Warriors are really good at this, and the Spurs used to be really good at it too. That you can swipe under the basket, and the referees have a harder time getting the angle on it. So if the ball goes down, you need to crowd the paint even. I think they need to sell out and crowd the paint even more. I just think that they need to absolutely crowd the paint and just be like, if Kentavious Caldwell-Pope goes off for 25 points, so be it. If Kyle Kuzma gets hot, so be it. But we have to get Dwight Howard off of Jokic. We got to get Dwight Howard away from rebounds. We have to be able to combat this. Like there's going to have to be work done in order to combat that. And like I said, I think if you bring in Porter, that's enough length and athleticism swooping in. You might be able to at least limit what Dwight can do, and you're going to be fine. I just looked at some numbers during the break. Again, the Lakers scored less than a point per possession in the half court. They can't score in the half court.
Right. They're not efficient at all.
Rebounds. Yeah, it's just offensive rebounds and transition. And it's tough. They're really good in both those areas. They're elite in both of those areas. But if they can contain, then they're going to have a chance to win because the Nuggets are still getting points. They're still finding ways to score. I also think the where the fouls go, like the foul differential is going to be consistent, but I think where the fouls go can change. And if they don't go on Jokic, it's going to be, I think, a lot better. Jokic is also going to have to probably play a little bit more passive. Like this is part of it is, as that may sound counterintuitive to say, like, you're just going to let Dwight get all these putbacks. The rebounds won't always go in that direction. They won't always land in his spot. And if Jokic is able to keep up on offense, they'll be fine. Like, the Nuggets have a much better offense. They just do. And so if they can make this into an offensive series, they can win. But they keep trying to really ratchet up and play because, again, Malone wants to try and win this thing with defense, which makes sense on the surface because you're like, if they have a bad offense and you don't let them score, what are they going to do? And it's like they're just going to rebound over you and they're going to score in transition. But if you're really cooking on offense, I don't think they can keep up. They have to find shooters. This continues to be a thing. They're going to have to find shooters. They got to win the three-point battle. If they win turnovers in three-point battle, they win. That's it.
I think that's fair, and I like what you're stating there because it is one of those things that people would think is counterintuitive, but you think about the free throw disparity that we know will be there. And it's not as if you're really telling Nikola Jokic, don't try so hard, or Paul Millsap, don't try so hard. It's more understand that you are going to get a bad whistle. Try to reduce the number of opportunities for them to give it to you, especially when you're pointing out. It's great that, if the Lakers get a putback, but if the ball doesn't bounce to Dwight Howard, he can't get a putback. So that's a very, very insightful point there, Matt, that the idea that the Nuggets are making it a little too easy at times for the refs to create that disparity by, reaching, by being physical when there's no real advantage to being physical. And that's going to be tough for the Nuggets to deal with because, as you pointed out, Michael Malone wants them to scrap and fight defensively. But in this matchup, some of that can be a problem.
Yeah, and that's a large part of it. Like, you're not going to get – the big guy gets hurt when they're guarding smaller dudes. Big guys don't get calls when they're being guarded by bigger dudes. And
right.
Jokic is handsy when he's out of his game. When he's off kilter and a little bit off, he gets worse about being handsy, trying to swipe and create little stuff. He tries to find, like, sneaky ways to contribute, but it's like you're just going to get called, man. Like, they are ready to call that foul on you. It's – Draymond Green on Twitter was talking about how Jamal Murray didn't get the call in the fourth quarter versus LeBron because he hasn't been in the league long enough to get that call.
Yeah,
and that's part of it. Yeah, and that's part of it for sure. But this is also part of it. Like, it's patently absurd that, like, Nikola Jokic isn't getting calls on completely washed up 2020 Dwight Howard. Like, that's ridiculous. That this is where the call respect goes, but that's where it is. And so you have to be able to limit your number of swipes. I think you can, if the other guys swipe lower on the ball, I think you can do it. But some of this you're just going to have to give up. And I think a lot of it is the idea is that Dwight's so big and such a rim protector, and Davis is such a good weak side rim protector. But if they can figure out ways to score, which they have with those two on the court, it's going to be fine. You just got to be able to generate enough offense to make it to where Dwight's not usable because of the defensive end. And that sounds crazy, but you can do that if you're able to get the spacing and you can knock down threes.
We're talking with Matt Moore, our Nuggets insider, and one of the things that I look at too, and I guess maybe you could tell me why they're doing it. At times I find myself sort of throwing my hands up at the screen watching the Nuggets take a jump shot and then have everyone break back. Now, I know the Lakers are great in transition, but I also watch the Lakers have success on the offensive rebounding, something that I would make the argument that the Nuggets don't create as much of a focus on that. Is that due to the fact they're concerned about the Lakers' transition game, or is there something else?
Yeah, no, I really can't be. I cannot stress this enough. Everybody's got to get back. Like, this is literally where all of their offense comes from. Like, almost all their offense comes from transition. And even if you send, like, let's say you just send the guards back. We saw this in the first two games, where what they would do is, if you don't come up with the offensive rebound, they throw it ahead, and then Kentavious Caldwell-Pope has Murray or Harris or Morris, and then they're drawing calls because the other guys are smaller. So you don't have the length to contest in transition if you're not sending. Now, you can try sending the guards, but is Gary Harris going to get offensive rebounds over Anthony Davis? No. Like, that's just not going to happen. So I don't think that there's a big payoff there. I think if you can get in tip-ins, then sure, and that's another reason to play MPJ. I think MPJ should crash the glass for sure. I think you should send MPJ to crash. But Grant's not a good rebounder. Millsap is not able to jump high enough anymore. Jokic is physically bound to the floor. And Murray's grabbed a few because he's just been insane this postseason. But in general, that's not going to happen. Like, your chances of conversion in those situations are very low, and the cost of that is a super high opportunity in what the Lakers specifically want to do, because they're smart enough. They know their half-court offense isn't very good. They know they have to push the ball. So you can't be giving up those opportunities.
The adjustments that Michael Malone's made over the course of the playoffs, I give him credit for, because we know full well he doesn't really want to, right? I mean, that's the way it goes. But he has to adjust. He has to adapt. Do you think that this team has enough to do that at this point, or do you think they're willing to go down with the ship just playing the way they're playing?
I mean, look, in this series, he's gone to Jeremy Grant at the 5 and played P.J. Dozier. Mm-hmm. He's made the adjustments in 2 consecutive series schematically and with personnel to get the wins. So I don't think we can say that he won't. I think if he sees something that will help, he also said after the game, if you're not going to help us all on defense, maybe you're just not going to play. And everyone's wondering who that's
Mason
about.
Plumlee with that, do you think?
See, everyone says that. I would say this. Torrey Craig had the worst defensive rating on the team tonight at 146. And look, Torrey always plays pretty good defense, but he's also given you a 0 offensively. Right. Mason's not like, the reason Mason plays is not because they want to play Mason Plumlee. It's because Nikola Jokic needs to sit down for a few minutes. And you can't survive versus a team that's playing 3 bigs all the time without having a center on the floor for long periods of time. You can get by a little bit. They tried Paul Millsap at the 5 tonight, but I wonder if some of that is – I think some of it may have been aimed at Plumlee. I also wonder if some of it was named to Craig.
I think there's some realistic possibility that that's the case too. And Craig did play a few more minutes than you'd expect. But yeah, I think the interesting idea with Michael Porter Jr. again, I think a lot of people are going to focus on his very, he didn't really secure a rebound, let it get knocked off, bounced out of him late, and that was costly. But again, I think for the second straight game, he looked pretty good. He looked like he belonged there, and watching him grow up in just maybe the last 10 games has been pretty remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like...
You sounded so sure there.
Yeah, it's like he looks pretty good, and I'm like, he's going to have to look a lot better. Like, you're just gonna, like, I think you need more from him. He hit 3 of 6 from 3 tonight, and that's big. He was only a -1. 13 points with 8, with 8 boards. Like, I get it. I do, but I think for him, the big thing is he's getting, LeBron knows. Like, LeBron picked up like, oh, okay, the kid's out there. The kid's pretty good. Let's make him hurt. And so he's attacking him pretty consistently. I don't know if you're Michael Malone, how much pain tolerance you can handle with that. Like, he's a net positive. Everyone sees all the good things he can do. But when you just see, like, LeBron brushing past him like he's not even there, it's just going to wear on you. I think he needs to, but I think it's tough. I do think that they need to do more in terms of probably when Porter is on James, they need to blitz the pick and roll ball handler and put 2. Like, they just need to double LeBron. Get the ball out of his hands, sell for anything else. If that means Anthony Davis is running loose, okay, like, make Davis make a play. But I do think they need to help him out a little bit there. I think he's looked better and he's looked good, and he continues to do the things that they need, but they're going to need more from him still.
This is such an interesting series. I obviously look, the odds on the Nuggets coming back down 3-1, 3 straight series is phenomenal. I mean, I wouldn't even take a guess on what it would be. It's only happened a couple times ever, and you'd have to do it 3 times in a row. But for the Nuggets, let's look a little bit ahead and presume they don't win this series. What would be the primary takeaway of what they need to do in the off season?
I think it gets tougher now, honestly, because going in, I thought, like, okay, they need one more guy. They got to get one more guy. They need Drew Holiday. They need Bradley Beal. They need whoever. That was who I thought. And now I can't say that because Jamal's been a superstar. Like, he has been top level. He went toe-to-toe with LeBron tonight.
He has
He was,
played
like,
at
the Lakers.
he's played at a top tier
The Lakers
level.
were scared of him. Yeah. Yeah, the Lakers were scared of Jamal Murray. So you can't trade him. He's not going anywhere. You can't trade MPJ. He's 6'10", can shoot 50, 40, 90. Like, you can't trade him. You just can't. So where do you go? Like, how do you go from here? How do you add another guy? I think now you start looking at, okay, how do we add on to our weaknesses? I think probably a different backup center is going to be the play, which will make everyone very happy, even though I think Mason's been a fine backup for years. I think they need another wing shooter to replace what they lost with Malik Beasley, somebody that's a little bit better on defense. And honestly, like, I do keep looking at the idea of, if this is in a year from now and they're facing the Lakers again in the Western Conference Finals, which, look, that's unlikely. A lot of things would have to happen again. But if that was the case, maybe Bol is ready. And I would love to see Bol versus Anthony Davis. That's, like, the only matchup I think I can think of that's, like, that might honestly swing some things. Like, that would be – Davis would be pretty miserable being guarded by Bol. And so, like, maybe that's it. But I think the other thing is, you shifted from this team needs a major upgrade to, no, we're in the Western Conference Finals. We're right there. Like, we hung with the Lakers, could have won that series. We just need small moves around the edges. That, I think, is the big takeaway.
All right, he is Matt Moore, the Nuggets insider for us, and you follow him at HP Basketball on Twitter. You definitely want to do that. Hopefully you got in the coach's ear about the maybe swapping out Porter Jr. and throwing him in that starting lineup, because I'm with you. The one thing that does seem to disrupt the Lakers is size, and you just need to get tall and you need to get big and get in their way. So this was a good game by the Nuggets. It's a loss, but I really don't have very much to criticize. Given the circumstances, they played a very good game. Under different circumstances, they would have won the game. So thank you for the time breaking it down, and we'll find out next week whether they're still in it or whether we'll be taking a look at what they'll do in the offseason. Thanks so much for the time, Matt.
Talk to you soon, Sean. Thanks.
All right, that is Matt Moore doing extra duty here. Very much appreciate that, courtesy of Budweiser, the official beer sponsor of the Denver Nuggets. Okay, let's deep breath. Let's cleanse the palate with a little Broncos football, shall we? There's a carousel of quarterbacks to attend to. We'll do that next. The Denver Nuggets end up falling to the Los Angeles Lakers, but we're going to turn our attention to the Denver Broncos, who have a rather important game. They do not want to start 0-3, and they have to face, well, their old nemesis, Tom Brady. Of course, Tom Brady and the Broncos have a long history, and it's the only team in the entire NFL in which Tom Brady has a losing record against. Broncos would like to keep it that way because with a win, Brady gets back to 500. Wouldn't have a losing record against anybody. So not a lot of fun there. I think the Broncos fans would love to keep that record from the guy that is generally going to be considered probably one of the very best, if not the best of all time, regardless of position. So in this particular game, it's tough. The Broncos are ravaged by injury. I mean, it is unbelievable, the MASH unit that they have assembled down at Dove Valley. All these different players of significance for them when you're talking the quarterback, the running back, the wide receiver on offense. Of course, your best player in your team, Von Miller, your top cornerback. I mean, it's devastating. And it would be reasonable for the Broncos to be a little frustrated and to be a little devastated, but they can't afford it. Jeff Driscoll is the starting quarterback, and the Broncos added Blake Bortles. That was kind of big news because he was a name you've heard of, but I talked about it this week, and I don't believe Blake Bortles is even going to get into a game. And he's there as the emergency guy. If the Broncos would have wanted Blake Bortles as the backup to Drew Lock, they could have signed Blake Bortles. So the objective here does not seem to be to replace Jeff Driscoll. Bortles, of course, just got to practice today, wearing number 5, one of the fewest worn numbers in Denver Broncos history, mind you, even though Joe Flacco did that just it's not really part of last season. It's hard to believe. It feels like forever ago. But in Bortles' case, not only is he not going to, I think, be impactful on this team in any significant fashion, he's probably not going to be doing anything in the next week or two. He's certainly not going to be expected to get into this game, at least not according to Coach Vic Fangio. So Brett Rippon will be the backup, and you'll see him on the active roster, and he should be. Makes perfect sense. Rippon was added to the 53 today, and that ends up being the expectation. So the whole Bortles thing, it's just interesting because he's a name, right? It's someone you're familiar with, and so it sounds like maybe that means something because you're not familiar with Jeff Driscoll. But the Broncos are familiar with Jeff Driscoll. That's why they signed him away from the Detroit Lions. And as far as Vic Fangio is concerned, Driscoll, until Drew Lock comes back, he's the man. Which means that they're not looking to replace him with Blake Bortles. As long as he's doing as good a job as he can do, and he did a phenomenal job in the loss to the Steelers. Given the circumstances, he was terrific. The offensive line was Swiss cheese. They gave up 7 sacks. They gave up 17 quarterback hits, and Driscoll absorbed 6 of those sacks. He still ended up completing 18 of 34 for 256 yards, 2 touchdowns. Yes, he threw a pick, but I thought his performance was fantastic. And I thought given the circumstances, having to run for your life at the first moment, I thought he was great. And in Driscoll's case, he is the man for this week against the Bucs. Phillip Lindsay is out. Cortland Sutton is out. That means the Broncos have fewer guys to lean on. One of the more significant ones, probably the most significant one, certainly the most accomplished one, is Melvin Gordon, who the Broncos gave a 2-year, $16 million contract to in the offseason. Well, let's put it this way. This is Melvin Gordon's time to shine, right? Because the Broncos will not win this game if they just get in a passing battle. If you're just going back and forth, chucking the ball around with Tom Brady, I know Brady's in his 40s, but you're going to lose. The receivers for Tampa are ridiculous. They have targets everywhere, including 2 of them out of the backfield. But in Gordon, they have a good runner who's got a nose for the end zone and a nose for the first down, and he's pretty good at catching the ball, too. Melvin Gordon was asked earlier today what he's supposed to do to help Jeff Driscoll take over the Broncos. And that's obviously what you expect to hear and probably what you want to hear, because if you hear the sort of concept that sometimes we get that, okay, well, I've really got to step up my game. I've got to do something different. Well, why would you? If you're doing your best, you're doing your best. And that's what Gordon is hinting at, that if you're going to go do your best regardless, then it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. But there certainly is going to be an awareness. And I would expect that the game script is going to feature Melvin Gordon in a way that we haven't seen him featured in Denver, and probably haven't even seen him featured with the Chargers for a long time, because there's every indication that Gordon's going to be the bell cow. In the loss to the Steelers, Melvin Gordon got 19 carries. Royce Freeman got 3. Now, funny thing is with Pat Shurmur, I talked about this all offseason, right? The ratios of carries, especially, and we talked about it in reference with Philip Lindsay. And you take a look at the average when Shurmur's been a play caller of the running backs and the carries he gives. Well, on average, Shurmur's RB1 gets 3 times the number of carries as the backup. Well, in this game, it was even more than that. It was 6. So you'll get a few more for Royce Freeman. But even so, if you're talking about 20 carries for Melvin Gordon, you're talking about 6 or 7 for Royce Freeman. Gordon's going to be the guy. KJ Hamler got a run. I would quite frankly expect to see KJ Hamler get another run in this particular game, because their other rookie receiver, besides Jerry Jeudy, made his debut against the Steelers and, quite frankly, looked pretty good, pretty ready. Earlier today, he was asked about the difference between his college experience and the NFL one. I bet Tom Brady didn't appreciate that comment as much as it was probably meant to remind him how old. Basically, as KJ Hamler pointed out, it's like, wow, he's old, but he's still getting it done. And while he's not the same quarterback he was, it's not something the Broncos can expect that the Buccaneers are only going to put up 10 points or something. They'll be better than that. And in Hamler's case, it's a good sign that he's not talking about some of the things you hear a lot of rookies talk about. Well, I have to get used to the speed of the game. Well, I have to get used to that. Well, Hamler basically said it felt like another game. So the speed didn't necessarily bother him, and that means one of two things. Either his college experience was good enough at Penn State to feel like he was ready for this style of play, which is entirely possible, or the coaching staff of the Broncos have gotten him ready, or, most realistically, a combination of the two. And that's credit to the Broncos coaching staff. But in Hamler's case, he believes he's ready to go. And the Broncos wanted him to be a big part of this offense, but they didn't want him to be this big a part of the offense. They expected to have Cortland Sutton. They expected to have Philip Lindsay. Now you have Melvin Gordon. You have a second-year tight end and 2 rookie wide receivers that are your most explosive offensive players. Hamler talked about how that feels earlier today. So in that case, Hamler knows that it's ready to, you have to do it. It's the Broncos' old next man up, right? I mean, that's the thing that they end up talking about is the whole next man up concept. And for Hamler, when you talk about the idea of catching from Jeff Driscoll, it's not really that weird because, by the way, that's the guy that threw to him for the majority of his first NFL game. So obviously one game doesn't create all that much familiarity, but it doesn't hurt when you're going into your second game and realize, okay, I've seen this guy. I've seen what the ball looks like coming out. I can track it. It's all set up. I'm ready to go. In Driscoll's situation, the Broncos want him to do a lot of important things, but they don't want him to do too much. And that's a complicated thing for backup quarterbacks to understand. And most backup quarterbacks are in the same thing. If you are a good enough player to be able to talk to a coach and the coach says, okay, go win this game for us. You can say that to Tom Brady. You can say that to Patrick Mahomes. You can say that to Lamar Jackson. You can say that to Aaron Rodgers. You can say that to Drew Brees. You can even say that to a Derek Carr. But those are starting quarterbacks. And more than anything, that's what makes starting quarterbacks starting quarterbacks. Do you believe that when the chips are down, you can go tell that guy, go win us the game? More than anything, more than arm strength, more than mobility, more than the college you came from, more than experience, more than anything. What separates a starting quarterback in this league from everybody else is the knowledge that a coach can say, go win this game, and know that the guy has the tools and the intestinal fortitude to do it. Now, that's not knocking Jeff Driscoll, but he's not that guy. That's not an insult. It's like saying that you're a really good basketball player, but you can't dunk because 7 feet tall guys dunk. Okay, well, that's the way it goes. Not everybody's cut out for the same thing. So Driscoll, who of course was that guy, everybody in the NFL was basically a star in college. There's not guys on the NFL that were scrubs in college. It doesn't happen. I don't care if you came from a small school or whatever, but just doesn't happen. You were good. Guys like Philip Lindsay, who was the University of Colorado's offense. He was basically the entire offense. And he ended up not drafted. And you saw what he can do. So in Driscoll's case, it's not as if he hasn't played in important games. But at the NFL, he's going to be asked to do something different. They're not going to ask Jeff Driscoll, go out and win us the ball game. That's what they ask starters. What they ask backups is don't go out and lose it. Don't make the mistake. And you'll notice with young quarterbacks and with quarterbacks that are maybe older, not established, that's what they ask them too. The Dolphins don't ask Ryan Fitzpatrick to go win the football game. They don't. They hope that he can. But they don't look at it and go, well, we know we can hand the keys to Ryan Fitzpatrick and he'll take us there. They know he might. He might. And that's why he's still starting, because they don't have a better option. But they also know that his days are numbered. The Dolphins are just biding time until Tua Tagovailoa is ready, because they feel that he can be the guy they can ask to go win it. Driscoll's in that other category. The Broncos are going to ask him not to lose the game, which means you have to make more significant decisions. Drew Lock, for example, as the starter, that they know he's got to sling it a little bit. Drew Lock makes a throw that's a little questionable. Well, he's got to go out and win it. In Driscoll's case, he's trying to not lose it. So he can't take the same kind of risks. And that does limit the Broncos' offense. Not only because Driscoll isn't quite the quarterback with the upside that Drew Lock is, hopefully, but it's also just because this is his role. And if they lose him, you got a Brett Rippon. You talk about inexperienced. Thy name is Brett Rippon. So they don't want to go that route, obviously. But Driscoll did a nice job. The mobility is there. He certainly can do the job. He's very athletic. And he's got a decent amount of experience. Yes, he doesn't have a great record. Few backup quarterbacks do. It's hard to win with a backup quarterback in this league. There are not 32 quality starting quarterbacks at the NFL level on earth at any given time. And you can tell. Just go around the league and look. So this is Driscoll's reality. And what they're asking him to do is something very, very different. Earlier today, offensive coordinator Pat Shurmur took some time to break down Driscoll's performance in Pittsburgh. The comment about his size was interesting because, and I think that gets overlooked. Driscoll is not small. Drew Lock is 6'4", 228. Driscoll is 6'4", 235. And he can move. So, obviously, his ability to take a shot. He got sacked 6 times on Sunday. So, I'm not necessarily looking at this situation with Driscoll, which I believe is going to last until the Broncos bye, and think that they're doomed. Now, is this game going to be a tough one to get? Yes, it is. And it's not on Jeff Driscoll entirely to do it. But as Pat Shurmur talked about, he did make some really good throws. And he basically made every throw under duress. So given all of that, I think you have to be pretty positive. When the Broncos signed Driscoll, they signed him with the knowledge that they didn't want a name. Jameis Winston was out there. Cam Newton was out there. Heck, Blake Bortles was out there. And you saw how everybody over the week kind of lost their mind. Oh my gosh, Blake Bortles is here. What does it mean? I told you on this show. It means nothing. It means you got an extra warm body who's played quarterback in case your guys get hurt. But it's because of that talk. We were talking about Blake Bortles this week. It's because of that talk that the Broncos didn't pursue any name brand backup quarterbacks because they wanted to find out. This season was always going to be a referendum on whether Drew Lock can be the guy or not. Is he a guy or is he the guy? Is he going to be the kind of quarterback that you can absolutely go win? Is he going to be a top tier guy? I don't think he's going to be Aaron Rodgers. I could be wrong. I don't think so. Could he be Kirk Cousins? Yeah. Yeah, he could be that kind of quarterback. Could he be Derek Carr? Sure. Probably not going to get that high completion percentage because he's a bit of a gambler with it. But could he be those level of quarterbacks? Yeah, he can't be Deshaun Watson. He can't be Patrick Mahomes. He's not going to be Tom Brady. But could he be Jimmy Garoppolo, who led the Niners to a Super Bowl last year? Yeah. But the Broncos season was always all about finding out. Always. And that's why they signed Driscoll. He's 27. He's athletic. He's reliable. But he's not a name brand. Because the Broncos didn't want a quarterback controversy. And if there's one thing that people in Colorado like more than times in the outdoors and skiing and all the other things that we love in Colorado, it's quarterback controversies. Admit it. People love them. They loved him all the way back to John Elway. I remember, I was pretty young, but I remember people clamoring for Gary Kubiak to start over John Elway after Elway had a couple bad games. I remember it. It was real. This town loves quarterback controversies. The Broncos knew it, and they went to get somebody that wasn't going to happen. Nobody in this town. It wasn't a Mark Sanchez type of situation where they got a name brand guy. Nobody in this town went, oh, Jeff Driscoll. Well, I wonder if he's going to push Drew Lock for the job. And that was the reason they signed him. But it doesn't mean he's not capable. And Shermer talked about what he considered rather minimal changes to the offense that they'll need to make for their backup quarterback. And if you're hearing Shermer basically say, I'm not cutting the playbook in half for Jeff Driscoll, that's the situation the Broncos are in because Drew Lock isn't all that experienced either. You heard in that quote, Shermer talked about the experience and how that affects them. Well, Driscoll's more experienced than Lock. So you can presume that while Lock's still learning the playbook and everything else, especially for their fifth offensive coordinator in 5 years with the Denver Broncos, Driscoll probably isn't behind Lock by very much, if at all. And that's a good sign. I'm not going to tell you that Jeff Driscoll is going to salvage the Broncos season and lead them to the playoffs, or that they're going to win all their games up until the bye when Drew Lock comes back. I'm not going to tell you that. I don't even think they're going to win Sunday. I'm not going to lie about that. But I am saying that I have seen far worse backup quarterbacks, and I have seen worse situations than this. And I'm quite frankly excited to see how Driscoll handles it, because I was very impressed with what he did against the Steelers. On Thursdays, we like to spend a little time basically trying to get a little armchair quarterbacking, little 2020 hindsight, those kind of things. With Bradley Chubb battling injury, not looking like himself, what would the Broncos have looked like if they had decided to keep Shaq Barrett? We'll hypothesize next. Well, when it comes to our Theoretical Thursday this week, this wasn't a this or that for the Denver Broncos, because when we're talking about Shaq Barrett, the NFL's reigning sack leader, former Colorado State Ram, the Broncos had both Shaq Barrett and Bradley Chubb at the same time. The idea to let Barrett go via free agency was not particularly popular even at the time. And in Barrett's case, it's not as if he was really electric in his last year with the Broncos, because he was blocked. The Broncos desperately wanted to get Bradley Chubb in that starting role, and he deserved it. He had it immediately. He took the job and he ran with it, having a terrific rookie year in which he had 12 sacks. Now, of course, ever since then, it's been difficult. But when you look at Shaq Barrett's time with the Denver Broncos, when they started with him in 2015, Barrett had been pretty consistent. 2015, he had 50 tackles, and then in 2016 dropped to 36, and then 37 in 2017, and then all the way down to 28 in 2018, the year that the Broncos added Bradley Chubb. Now, the interesting part of that equation was, even in that limited amount of time, he had a lot of sacks. 5.5 in 2015, only 1.5 in 2016, but then 4 in 2017 and 3 in 2018. So despite being a reserve linebacker with the Broncos, his entire time with the Broncos, he managed to pile up a decent amount of sacks. So, that ends up being 14 in limited duty. So there were reasons to believe that Barrett was more or less ready to break out. But the Broncos had Bradley Chubb. Now, they were very happy to get Bradley Chubb because Bradley Chubb's a very talented player, and they were delighted to grab him. At the same time, there were other directions they could have gone. And if they maybe would have read the tea leaves right, what would that have done? Well, they could have done what I recommended, and I like Bradley Chubb a lot. I really did. I wanted them to pick Quentin Nelson. That's the guy I wanted. I think when you looked at Nelson, you looked at a guy that was at minimum going to be a Pro Bowler, maybe even a Hall of Famer. And you look now, 3 years in, you go, oh yeah, he's going to be a Hall of Famer. If he stays healthy, that's the level. He is the best offensive lineman in football already, now. And that's who I was hoping the Broncos would select, all the while sweating and somehow thinking they'd pick Josh Allen, which I'm still glad they didn't do. But they could have gone with Quentin Nelson, in which case you wouldn't need to pay Graham Glasgow. A Quentin Nelson, Dalton Reisner guard combo sounds pretty good, right? And if that didn't work out, only a few picks later, at number 8, was Roquan Smith, who's become one of the best inside linebackers in all of football, a position that the Broncos have had a significant problem trying to fill. If you didn't like Roquan Smith, you could have grabbed Tremaine Edmonds or Leighton Vander Esch, two guys that play the same position, the inside linebacker spot, and they were selected in that first round. Wouldn't have need to bring in Kareem Jackson if you had drafted Minkah Fitzpatrick. You could have picked Mike McGlinchey at tackle, and you wouldn't have needed to sign Juwan James. So the Broncos didn't understand what they had in Shaq Barrett, which is disappointing. And they ended up letting him go via free agency, where he signed with the Buccaneers on a 1-year, $4 million deal, which we know what happened next. He had 19.5 sacks, and it feels like he's just hitting his stride at the age of 27. So disappointing for the Broncos to lose that hometown product, but then to watch him become one of the most feared pass rushers in the league, while the guy that you picked that ended up keeping you from picking players who, quite frankly, you needed more. I even remember at the time talking Shaq Barrett up. And I didn't know Shaq Barrett was going to turn into this. Do not get me wrong. I didn't know that at all. And I'm not going to tell you I knew that. I did not. I don't think most people saw that quantum leap coming. But his first year with Tampa in 2019, obviously he exploded onto the scene. Leapt up to 19.5 sacks in 16 games. So he I think, exceeded everyone's expectations. I'm not going to say the Broncos missed on that, because I don't think anyone could have realistically seen that. But they had a guy that was ready to start. And you thought that Shaq Barrett could at least handle the job. Now, the Broncos gambled on greatness, and they thought the greatness that they would have had was Bradley Chubb. And In his rookie year, he certainly was. Phenomenally talented player. He's still a phenomenally talented player. But after that first year, we know it's been a problem. And for Chubb, only 24 years old, injuries are becoming a real risk. After playing that terrific rookie season with 16 games and 12 sacks in 2018, down to 4 games in 2019 with a sack. And then in the 2 games this season, he has a grand total of 3 tackles. That's a problem when Von Miller's not there. They need Bradley Chubb to step up. It's not an effort thing with Bradley Chubb. He's just not right yet. His elbow's wrapped. He's been on and off the Broncos injury reports. He's missed practices. He's been out for certain practices but not done anything. Bradley Chubb's not healthy. Bradley Chubb hasn't been healthy since the end of 2018. That's not the Broncos' fault. But had they looked at Shaq Barrett, who they could have re-signed. Remember, Barrett took a 1-year, $4 million deal. What if the Broncos had signed him to a 5-year, $20 million deal? Can you imagine where they'd be today? The selection of Bradley Chubb was in part due to the fact that they didn't know what they had in Barrett. But maybe they should have. Because the signs were there. His sack rate per snap was outstanding his whole time with Denver. He didn't cost them a lot of money. The Broncos at the time they picked Chubb needed a lot of things. They were hoping for either Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold to drop. That didn't happen. Broncos fans were hoping for Saquon Barkley. The team wasn't really interested in grabbing him. They might have anyway if he had dropped to 5 just because of the talent, but they weren't after a running back that high. They had other needs. They needed a guard. They needed an offensive lineman anywhere. They needed Nelson or McGlinchey. They needed inside linebackers like Roquan Smith or Tremaine Edmonds or Leighton Vander Esch. And they needed a safety like Minkah Fitzpatrick or Derwin James. All of those players went within 14 selections of what Denver picked. They could have had any of them. And they might have had any of them. And quite frankly, knowing what we know now, Bradley Chubb's rookie year of 12 sacks is amazing. Shaq Barrett's first year as a starter, he had 19 and a half. The Broncos whiffed on this one. And part of the problem is, depending on Bradley Chubb's health, scary it is for Bronco fans to think, they might have whiffed twice. Because there is no question about Bradley Chubb's talent. There is also no question that injuries can turn a talented player into an average player. They can even turn them into a below average player, which is what Bradley Chubb is right now. The Broncos need him to be healthy. It's been more than a year since he has been. And every game that he ends up being hobbled, and especially this one on Sunday, is a difficult one to look at. Because as Vic Fangio talked about earlier today, what Shaq Barrett has become is pretty special. Well, the Broncos may have that mistake come back to haunt them directly. They gave up 7 sacks against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The man who had 19 and a half, the former Colorado State Ram and the former Denver Bronco, comes to visit to collect a few of his own on Sunday against the Broncos. Here's hoping he doesn't have too fun a time in his homecoming. Our time machine is next. always try to go back into sports history at this time of night and take a look at the things that were fun on this particular day. And one of them will start back in 1919. Of course, you think that as the year of the Black Sox incident in which the World Series ended up getting thrown, basically, and it's been controversial ever since. But yes, it got thrown. I mean, I think people understand that now. But it was also interesting because a 24-year-old former pitcher basically converted to being a full-time hitter in that year. And Babe Ruth was a terrific pitcher. Still actually has some World Series pitching records, which is pretty remarkable, seeing as he was doing that in the 1910s. But Ruth, of course, was a power hitter. We knew that. And on this date, he set the new season home run record for baseball with his 28th hit out of the park on this date. He finished it with a 29 and 113 RBI in his first season as a full-time outfielder. In the previous season of 1918, he hadn't been there full-time, and he still led the league in home runs with 11. So, aren't too many times that there's the Shohei Ohtani back in 1918, 102 years ago. Babe Ruth doing that, except leading the league. Ruth would go on to lead the league after 1919. He was traded to the New York Yankees, and traded to the New York Yankees by owner Harry Frazee of the Red Sox in order to finance a play, the musical No No Nanette. That is legitimately what happened. He wanted to finance a play, and he needed money. And so, off goes Babe Ruth to the Yankees, and the rest is history. Babe Ruth finished in the Hall of Fame, of course, won the MVP, was an All-Star twice. He would have been an All-Star many, many more times, but the All-Star game wasn't invented. Amazingly, he was only MVP once. He won a batting title. He won 7 World Series. And he won an ERA title as a pitcher. The number of people who have won the ERA title as a pitcher and the batting title as a hitter number exactly one person. Babe Ruth. So on this day, set the new record with 28 and finished with the season with 29. That record did not last, as the very next year, his first with the Yankees, the all-time record was 29. He obliterated it and hit 54 home runs the very next year, which was more, quite frankly, than every other team except the St. Louis Browns. Actually, I take that back, because the Browns had 50 home runs. So actually, Babe Ruth out-hit every team in the American League in home runs. Just Babe Ruth. The Browns had 50. My memory was off. I had to take a peek at that. Yeah, that was it. The league average was 46 home runs for a team. The team. In 5,980 at-bats on average, 46 home runs for a team. Babe Ruth knocked in 54 home runs in 458 at-bats. Yikes. Whew. 1946, one of the most beloved athletes in football history, unless you were a quarterback, in which case, you want to know a piece of this guy. Mean Joe Green, born on this date in Texas in 1946. Famous, of course, as the leader of that steel curtain defense for the Steelers in the 70s, and known for that Coca-Cola commercial where he threw that kid his jersey. I mean, not even joking. A super huge commercial with, getting athletes into it, and it's a big deal. So happy birthday to Mean Joe Green. One of the most fun players to watch. Go ahead and YouTube some of Mean Joe Green's highlights one day. Whew. There are certain people you're like, yeah, but he couldn't play in today's. But, that guy could have played in today's. He would have been fine. In fact, his smaller size would have made him a very nice, what we now we call an edge rusher. So it might not have been a defensive end per se, like he was back then, but he'd be in the Von Miller position, the TJ Watt position, and he would be horrifying if you were an opposing quarterback. Go back to 1957, the Brooklyn Dodgers play their final game at Ebbets Field. They beat the Pirates 2-0, and then the migration to California baseball began. The Brooklyn Dodgers ended their longtime run in New York on this date in 1957. And then in 2018, one of Dylan and my favorites, and Dylan's a Flyers fan, so it's a little bit different. I am not. And I'm not really a huge mascot fan, but I like certain mascots. And on this date in 2018, the Flyers debuted Gritty. And Gritty is basically my spirit animal. Like in breaks, he's like checking people into like the boards, doing all sorts of hilarious things. He's the new San Diego Chicken. He's the new Phoenix Gorilla. He's the new one in sports. That's the one you want. That's the mascot. If there's a mascot in American sport, it's not Dinger. Rocky's really close. It's got to be Gritty. It's got to be Gritty. Gritty's awesome. It's all orange and weird and googly-eyed with a helmet. It's great. I don't even care about mascots, but I like Gritty. Of course, Dylan is a Flyers fan, really likes Gritty. Good for you. He looks like a giant pom-pom, kind of.
He's the best part about the Flyers. I'm saying
well, I will definitely agree with you on that.
As a Flyers fan, he's the best part about the Flyers.
Yeah, there's no question about that. He's got to be the best part of it. Yeah, absolutely. The person who designed Gritty, by the way, was David Raymond, who was the person who designed the Philly Fanatic. So they kept in town there, and he was the guy that put those two together. That's a pretty good run. If you're making mascots and you've made two of them, and it's the Fanatic and Gritty, you need to get hired more. I mean, somebody's got to, seriously. I mean, that's good. That's really good. And what a great name, because, I mean, hockey players and hockey fans love to talk about grit. Coaches love to talk about it. Well, we have to get more grit in our lineup. It's like a weird hockey thing that everyone likes to say. So, yeah, it's genius. A couple of years ago, best mascot in hockey. It is not whatever one the Avs have. Is it Bernie? The St. Bernard? Yeah, it's okay. He just kind of stands there. It's fine. I mean, I get it. It's an Avalanche St. Bernard. It's supposed to have the little whiskey thing around his neck. I get it. It's okay. But it's not Gritty. The Colorado Rockies find a way to get it done today in extra innings. Their first extra inning win of the season. Josh Bard gets the win in relief. Daniel Bard. Pardon me. Thank you, Dylan. The Bard gets the win in relief, pitching 2 2/3 innings in relief. His story has been one of the best of the year for the Rockies. The Rockies have had very many good stories. But Bard's return to the majors and his ERA of 3.65, terrific. Chichi Gonzalez, who's been, quite frankly, abysmal for the Rockies, goes 5 1/3 and gives up 8 hits, 3 earned runs, enough to keep him in the game. The Rockies get it done with a run at the top of the 11th inning and finish it off with a great double play led by Trevor Story in a diving throw from the backside to start it all off. That keeps the Rockies technically alive. Technically is the key. They are sitting as the only team right above the pile of teams with E's next to their name, and you don't want that. They are 25 and 31. I said that you were going to have to get to 500 to get to the playoffs, and I still believe that's going to be the case. But the Rockies get a little bit closer. They're still alive. They're going to need to win out. On the bright side, they have the right team to do it. The Arizona Cardinals at 22 and 34 are the second worst team in the entire National League. The Rockies will have 4 of them against the Diamondbacks to finish their season. The Denver Nuggets fall to the Los Angeles Lakers in somewhat controversial fashion, quite frankly. The Lakers had lobbied for more calls. They certainly got them. LeBron James and Anthony Davis alone had more free throws than the entire Denver Nuggets team in what was a 6-point game. And controversy abounds across the NBA landscape. It's been talked about. The announcers talked about it in the fourth quarter. Expect the Nuggets to get a little better whistle on Saturday, because I think the league is going to be embarrassed by how obvious this was tonight. So for the Nuggets, maybe on Saturday, a little more fair treatment coming their direction. It's been fun. Thanks to Nick Ferguson for joining us. Thanks to our Nuggets insider, Matt Moore, for joining us. Follow him at HP Basketball. And Nick, of course, you can listen to right here every weeknight on The Fan. Thanks to Dylan Condon. DC's the man that makes it all work out. makes everything work. Literally, like I tell you, I don't know what any of the buttons do. And actually, broadcasting from home still, I don't even have any buttons. It's all Dylan. Thanks a lot, Dylan. We'll get back at it tomorrow. We're going to give things over to our friends at Sports Center All Night. I'm Sean Drotar. You can follow me at SDROTAR on Twitter. This is The Fan Late Night on Denver Sports Station, Sports Radio 104.3, The Fan.